So first we're going to talk about the new NFL CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, and I'm actually going to trim this little portion of this up here on YouTube. So a quick aside, if you are watching this on YouTube, please do hit that like button down below and check out the rest of this podcast. That's the Fully Inflated Football Podcast on all of your podcasting services. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the wide receiver class as a whole, going about 30 deep. So definitely go check that out. The new collective bargaining agreement is a big deal, and we're just going to kind of go through what the differences are, and then I'm going to react to what I like and what I don't like. So some of the smaller stuff, we're going to have an increase for the lower class of the NFL. You're talking about league minimum contract veterans as well as the rookies. So this was kind of a sneaky move by the ownership. They included like a $100,000 salary increase over the next 10 years. And if they wanted to get the 17 game thing in, this was kind of a sneaky way to do it, because yeah, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Richard Sherman, they don't really care about that. $100,000 is nothing to them. But to the league minimum contract, that's a massive, 12, 13% in their salary. So those guys are going to vote for this. So I don't know if that was intentional by ownership. I think it probably was to kind of push this thing forward. But the lower class going to make a little more money moving forward. Rookies are going to get more in performance incentives. Those rookie contracts are so cheap. But if you're a guy like, say, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, you come in and I don't know why I use two Saints, but you come in and just dominate as rookies, as second, third round picks, your salary is going to get escalated to be a little more fair. It's still going to be pretty cheap, but definitely going to compensate you so you're not on that league minimum contract as one of the best players in the league. So that's all really good for the lower level salary players. And then we now have no more marijuana suspensions. They will still do drug tests, but if you test positive for marijuana, will not include a suspension. It just felt like that was a little outdated. Marijuana is legal now in a lot of states. So if you're legally smoking marijuana, if you're in a state where it's still illegal, you can get in legal trouble, which is still probably going to lead to suspensions. But if you're in Colorado, if you're in Seattle, Washington, I'm pretty sure you can just go ahead and smoke pot. So does that become a free agent advantage for certain teams and players? If players like to smoke pot, is that going to appeal better to those teams? Maybe that becomes a factor. The other question is guys like Josh Gordon, Randy Gregory, Martavis Bryant, who are kind of, druggies, to put it. There's really no other way around it. Do they make their way back into the league? With a guy like Josh Gordon, I kind of feel like he's just been given so many chances. When he was on the field last year, he wasn't even all that good, to be completely honest. So I feel like he's kind of getting phased out, but do we see the return of Martavis Bryant? Maybe. Randy Gregory, I think, might be the first guy that starts to get a little leeway. Now, I will say, this was a rule when it was in place, and they violated those rules. So they still kind of have to pay the price for that, but maybe we see a little more leeway with some of those guys. Ultimately, it's not going to change a whole lot. Now, these are the biggies here. So we have a 17-game season now, which is going to cut the preseason short by a week, I think. Don't quote me on that, but that seems like the logical thing to do. I know there's a lot of discussion about that. I can only assume that that's the plan. I haven't confirmed that. But I love this part, and we'll talk about the playoff stuff in a second, which I'm not a fan of, but this is big. I'm excited about this. I've been a little critical of this CBA throughout this process because of the playoff stuff. But as far as a 17-game season, I think it's good. And, it's good from an entertainment standpoint, from a business standpoint for me and everyone else. Fantasy football, the money is going to be bigger. Everything is going to benefit from 17 games from a money and entertainment standpoint. Now, for the players, it's unfortunate. It's another week, but they cut that preseason week out, so it's not a huge difference. The injury risk is slightly more, but I think some guys like Aaron Rodgers, they're kind of overreacting, I think, to what this means from an injury standpoint. I think that they're just kind of, I don't criticize Aaron Rodgers too much, but I think that's just kind of elitist, to be honest. And maybe that's not my place to say that. I'm not an NFL player, but clearly the majority of the NFL was not quite as worried about playing that extra week. They're more interested in the increase in money that this is going to bring to the players as a benefit to the league as a whole. Now, let's talk about this freaking playoff format. This is where I'm going to start to get really angry. And this is why. At first, I was like, the NFL 16-game season compared to other sports, like that's what makes it great. And every game feels like a playoff game. You get these intense end-of-season battles. Like last year, it was, the Raiders, Titans, Steelers, like that whole dynamic, like who's getting in. And that, to me, it's going to diminish a little bit, but you add in the fact that only one team gets a bye now. Like, in reality, I was probably overreacting to that. The intensity of the regular season probably isn't going to change a whole lot. Adding 2 more playoff teams, it's still going to be really entertaining, really intense. But what I cannot stand about adding 2 more playoff games, two playoff teams and 2 games, is what this does from a competition standpoint. Here's the deal. In the NFL, if you're a wild card team, if you're one of the bottom seeds, all you got to do is win 4 games, and you're a Super Bowl champion. In the other sports, I had a tweet about this. In the other sports, you got to win 15, 16 games to be the champion. It eliminates so much room for randomness and error, whether it's a random dropped ball, a bad play call that we've seen time and time again. Hell, a coin toss in overtime because the overtime rules are unbalanced. Getting into the playoffs in the NFL is such a gift. Such a gift. The Titans were 8-8 last year. They got in, they went to the AFC Championship. So to add 2 teams in, to me, it totally removes the competition. It's penalizing the best teams, the teams that deserve the championships. Teams like last year's Chiefs, for example, the Super Bowl champions. Instead of last year's playoff format where they got a first round bye as the 2 seed, instead of having to win 2 games, they would have to play 3 games. And you're giving the opportunity to a team like last year's Steelers to pull an upset, to get a random call that changes a game, to have Patrick Mahomes go down with a concussion, a la Carson Wentz in the Eagles-Seahawks game last year. The NFL has so much freaking randomness. You only play 1 game. So to allow a 7th team who, let me read off who these teams would have been going back to 2015. To allow these teams that opportunity to get to a Super Bowl, to me, is what drives me insane. And that's where it takes away some of the value of the regular season because you're adding an element of randomness to the playoffs. And that is why I can't stand the NBA, why I can't stand the NHL. You let half the freaking league into the playoffs. What's the point of the regular season? So it's not quite to those degrees. It's less percentage of the league as a whole. You're still only playing 17 games, but I just hate this so much. Listen to these teams. 2019, the 8-8 Steelers would have been in. The 9-7 Rams would have been in. Neither of those teams deserve a playoff spot. But they're one Patrick Mahomes concussion or a Russell Wilson sprained ankle from going in and winning that game and taking that away from a team. 2018 would have been the 9-6-1 Steelers. The year Antonio Brown got kicked off the team and all this crap. They didn't deserve a playoff spot. That's one of the better teams of this whole list, though. And the 8-7-1 Vikings would have been in that year. Sub-500 football teams that did not earn the right to go and compete for a Super Bowl. They did not earn the right for a 4-game run to win a championship. It's ridiculous. 2017, it would have been either the 9-7 Ravens or the 9-7 Chargers. It would have been a 9-7 team in the NFC as well. 2016, 9-7 Bucks or 9-7 Titans or Ravens. Joe Flacco teams. The Bucks with Jameis Winston. 2015, the 8-8 Falcons would have made the playoffs. Then finally, we have a 10-win team, the 10-6 New York Jets. Finally, a team that at least was somewhat above 500 enough to say, okay, that team deserved to go to the playoffs. That's the last 5 years, maybe 1 out of 10 teams actually deserved that opportunity. I hate this. I think it's for all the reasons I said, a terrible idea. I'm very much against it, especially if they don't change overtime rules. I proposed that if you're going to take away that bye for the top, the number 2 seed, at least make it so that the home team in the playoffs wins the toss, right? You should at least get that extra incentive in the regular season. If you were a better regular season team, you should at least get the benefit of the doubt as far as the overtime coin toss. Because that's that 8-8 team that lucked into overtime against you doesn't deserve the chance to, all right, we get the ball. If we put it in the end zone, we win the game. And Patrick Mahomes doesn't even need to see the field. So lots of imbalance as far as competition goes, in my opinion. I absolutely hate this. From an entertainment standpoint, great. 2 more playoff games. That's awesome. But we are going to see over the next 10 years of this CBA a lot of really good 11, 12, 13 win teams getting dunked on by shitty teams. Shitty teams like the 8-8 Falcons in 2015. Last year's Steelers with Duck Hodges. Upsets happen in the NFL. There's only 100 plays in an NFL game. Randomness changes the outcomes of games all the time. So to do this for money, I think it's a really big imbalance in competition in favor of making more money and spreading more entertainment, which I get it from the owner's perspective, why they want to do it. But as a fan who roots for fairness in competition, I think this is a terrible idea. So that's that spiel on the new CBA. Again, if you watch that on YouTube, hit that like button. We're going to transition to the rest of the podcast now.